Hello and welcome to another Register Kettle, your chance to hear about the news from the people that actually write it. And this week it's all about AI because there's been a string of stories coming out suggesting that possibly AI is not the big bonus that everyone's been promising. Now, Tom, you've been looking directly at this, that AI PCs are actually making people less productive, is that right?
Yeah, well, Intel has a study out where they looked at AI PCs, which is something they have a significant interest in, as all of their hardware partners are now selling them. And one of the things they found is that when people use them, they're not necessarily more productive. In fact, they're less productive because most people just don't know what to do with them. And
Right.
the problem seems to be is like you are presented with this prompt, and you don't necessarily you're not used to using it, and you don't know what to say to it. And this comes up a lot of the times when you have like AI stuff. I mean, you can see this with Apple Siri stuff where they give you suggestions like, here are some of the things you can say to it. And I think that for PC users, they're accustomed over decades of using these things to working a certain way. And if you want to take advantage of an AI PC, you've really got to change the way that you work. And for a lot of people, that just doesn't come easily.
And remember very specific things, right? Like to note to your Siri response, right? One of the things I frequently will ask Siri in the evening, I'll have a HomePod. I'll frequently ask it in the evening, hey, what's the weather going to be like overnight? And if I don't phrase it in an exact specific way, it just repeats the daytime forecast, right? It doesn't tell me what's going to happen over the next few hours as it cools off. And it's one of those things that I find infuriating, right? Because I have to remember the exact specific way to ask. And if I change one word around, it gives you
one of the strange things about this whole prompt-based input. I mean, and it comes up a lot. If you've ever used one of the image AI tools where it's text to image and you give it a description of a picture that you want it to render, and then it produces it, what you find is that each of those different models has a whole bunch of stuff in the background that you never see. The system prompt, and the ones that are very successful, like Midjourney, have these very extensive system prompts that are hidden from you that have all this extra detail that is being fed into the model that tell it, this kind of style, but not that kind of style, and do it this way, so that it produces a commercially pleasing result. And my suspicion is that for a lot of these things, people just don't understand that they have to provide certain parameters or keywords or whatever to make it work. And it's not always consistent across products. So I think there is a lot of learning that has to go on. And
the fact that you can get job titles like prompt engineers, or the fact that there even is a skill called prompt engineering, means that there's something that's going a bit awry here. It's just, I agree. In the fact that if you didn't need to do prompt engineering, then everything I think we should, the fact that you need prompt engineering is a sign that things aren't as easy as to use as they should be.
It's not the plain language that we were promised, right? Like, you can just talk to this thing and it'll do what you want. No, not quite.
No, you've got to know the ins and outs of it. And honestly, from what I'm hearing from companies just are plonking these systems down on their staff with no training whatsoever and just saying, work it out, which seems a bizarre way.
Another thing also is that, if you're expected to work with prompts, to get my work done with prompt, it's like, would you rather just do the work in front of you, or would you sit opposite someone and tell them what you want and they would do it? I mean, it's basically, I don't know, like the thought of pair programming to me still gives me the heebie-jeebies. I would hate it. I would find that so frustrating. And this is what it's like. It feels like I'm doing pair work with people, right? If I just want to be like, I would like to write an email to someone, I would just sit down and write the email. I wouldn't turn to someone next to me and be like, hey, I need to write an email to my boss to explain. Because, that's basically what prompt is, isn't it, right? It's like it's like everybody has been given an assistant, but
they're clueless.
The assistant is clueless. I have to explain everything to it.
You have to discover, the commands to make it, be like, here's your command line. Why don't you try just playing around and seeing what works?
Right. It really does strike me as that, right? It's a completely different command line prompt, right? You're left to figure out how to do that. But even then, right, DOS, you could pick up a manual on how to use it, and it was consistent from machine to machine.
Right. It's consistent, right? I get consistent results. I guess that's the thing. It's I find the idea of a natural language, processor that can understand what I'm saying and do what I tell it. I think that sounds fantastic, but I think it has to be connected with actual intelligence. If you have to spell out, for me anyway, personally, if I have to spell out exactly what I want, I might as well already do it myself. It's that thing where if you can explain something clearly to someone and they understand it, that's a good sign that you understand the topic. If you can explain something so clearly to an AI assistant, you're probably at the point where you can just do it yourself. And if you can't explain it carefully, then you probably don't understand what the problem is. In which case, why not have an actual person do it? Rather than
And because a lot of the applications for these things are really sort of trivial. I mean, like I briefly turned on Apple Intelligence and saw that it was summarizing my email subject lines, which were perfectly clear.
Yes.
But then you had a second line that basically just repeated what the first line was, and it was just the stupidest thing ever. And for someone who works a lot with words, the whole idea that like I would throw away years of competency with language to say, hey, why don't you deal with this and summarize this for me and write something for me? It's like, just do your work. And then and you look at the marketing of these things too. I mean, Apple has these commercials out that basically seem to celebrate ineptitude because they, they show these people who are like, trying to come up with cheats for, doing their job instead of just doing the work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know how to wish my client happy birthday. Please write an email for me that wishes my client happy birthday. I mean,
that used to be what CRM software was for, right? So you could go in and look at the name of your sales partner's kids and be like, Howard, Timmy, and Sue.
Yeah.
Not anymore. You want the AI to go in there and do it for you.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, when Google launched Gemini on Android, for example, they said, I'd try it out. So I tried it out, and I ended up having to reinstall the Google Assistant because Gemini was just so lousy. It comes back to what you were saying, Brandon, unless you phrase it very, very carefully, you get the wrong result. And I just don't see the need for it.
Well, it's like the story I wrote last week about about Gemini wishing that college student or that grad student to off himself because, but like when you look back at the history of that conversation, it's basically this person trying to engineer a very specific response, and tweak it as they go to get the exact thing. And again, right, this looked like homework. So at that point, just do the homework yourself.
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
Exactly. And you've got to have the kit to do it on. And we've had a report out from Gartner this week saying that the AI PCs that come with all the extra MPUs and the rest of it and bells and whistles to run this code aren't very popular. They're premium priced, buyers aren't buying them, and they just don't see the business case for it. Now, it's unusual for Gartner to be quite so negative. I was quite surprised by that report.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't going to show up, I think, for a lot of these services that companies, are ultimately, they may initially go in like, oh, yeah, why not pay an extra $20 a month per seat for Microsoft 365 so that people have access to this? And then they're going to look at the, audit logs or whatever metrics they use and they go, people really aren't using this very effectively. Maybe we want to continue paying for this. And at some point, there will be a budget discussion. People go, we don't need to pay for the document summarization. We can just have people summarize things themselves or read the material and, show up at the meetings instead of having their avatar show up for them.
Yes.
But at that point, have the skills been lost? Probably not. But I mean, facetiously, I wonder, right? Like at some point you're going to be like, can you summarize this for me? And the person's like,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
I kind of feel that like we are in the 8 or 16-bit era of AI at the moment, or rather of LLMs at the moment. I mean, I don't want to like completely trash the whole concept of it because I can see where this could go and could work, but I really feel we're in the 8-bit era at the moment, and people have been asked to pay luxury prices for stuff that just I mean, there's political turmoil across the world. There's turmoil, upheaval, overhaul over the world, Western world, because of the cost of living, and at the same time, you've got tech companies saying, "Do you mind paying an extra $200 on top of your laptop to do something for a tool that is at best at the moment going to be an entertaining, addition to your user interface." I mean, it seems wholly
you're going to have to do a lot of settings. Oh wait, am I setting my stuff up to Microsoft or whoever to Google? I have to make sure that these models aren't ingesting sensitive data, and it's just a lot of headache.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, okay, we are going to have to go through a hardware refresh cycle, possibly because Windows 10 is going end of life at the end of in just under a year's time. And Windows 11 has some ridiculously high hardware requirements, even though it has been shown by many people that you can still run Windows 11 perfectly well on something that Microsoft says you shouldn't.
Have you heard of our Lord and Savior Linux?
Who needs a hardware refresh? You can run that thing on a refrigerator.
Yeah, that's right. If you're just using Chrome, Just sorry.
Just use a Chromebook or something. I mean, it's just like, and Windows 11, honestly, I know it's got all the bells and whistles thrown into it, but it doesn't look like that major of an upgrade. If Microsoft wasn't cutting support, I suspect most businesses would be perfectly happy keeping it.
Yeah, it's an operating system. It's just the thing that runs your hardware. It's the stuff that runs on top. Microsoft just loves to make its operating system more than an operating system. It just wants it to be the entire Microsoft experience. It's like...
Yeah. And I mean, by and large nowadays, right? What are most people, even in the enterprise world, using their computers for? They're a portal to web apps, right? I mean, sure, that's not a universal experience, right?
Yeah.
But for a lot of your basic line workers, right? I mean, you're logging into a Chrome window and you're using whatever stuff your company uses.
Yeah.
You know, your computer isn't important; it's a terminal,
Or a Firefox window or a Safari window. But yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like everything old is new again. I mean, at Ignite, they were showing their basically thin client, which, when was the last time I was, Sun? I mean,
Yeah, right. Network computer.
Well, there's Oracle had the NC concept about 20 years ago now.
Yeah.
How was Ignite? I mean, did you find much stuff there that was really useful?
I mean, I didn't spend a lot of time focused on it. I mean, I was looking specifically at some of the AI agent stuff that they were doing, and everybody seems to be doing that, which is, a further complication in the AI world, because it has the idea is you're going to have these things, connected to various apps and being able to do things, and it's probably not going to work out as well as people hope, because that kind of automation is complicated. And for years, PCs have had macros and automation, and my suspicion is they don't get a ton of use. I mean, there are certain things where, I'm going to automate the renaming of files or something, but this isn't like an everyday thing. And similarly, I think people are going to find it hard to just tell an agent how to automate some process and then reliably just turn it over to them and go, oh yes, all my work is being done by my agent.
Yeah.
I honestly want it to work. I really want it to work well. I would like to be able to type in, something like, can you create 4 virtual machines, each with 64 gigs of RAM, 8 virtual CPUs connected to this main storage. I want you to run this version of whatever operating system it is I want on there, and I would like you to spin those up, and I would like you to automate their recovery so that if any of them die, they're automatically restarted. I'd like to be able to do all that, and then not have the thing then say, okay, here's what I'm going to do, and then talks you through the whole thing. And then you're then having to kind of read it and be like, well, I don't know if that's correct or not, because if I did know if that was correct.
Isn't that just, a Docker file or CI/CD? I mean,
right.
Now,
at that point, yeah, but you could just sit down and just write it out. Like I'm trying to, you could just write out the script to be able to generate that, or the
and then at least you know exactly what's going to go on.
What's going to do.
Yeah.
That's it. I'm trying not to completely just be like, oh, this is just total trash. But at the same time, I'm really trying to find where the saving will be. And I think when you try to use these systems as a way of augmenting unskilled people, I just think this is a really weird way of tackling it. It's like I don't know, if someone is super competent at coding, I've tried to use AI assistance for it, and a lot of the time I'm still kind of like batting it away, being like, no. I know what I'm doing here. Like, I don't need this. And there are times when I tell you where it has been useful. I tell you where it has been useful is, because it's easy to say where it hasn't been useful, is when there are commands such as like git, which have so many different subcommands. I don't know which one I should be using. And I'm focused on the task at hand. I don't want to have to go and pick up a book on git. And things like Claude and Gemini have been quite useful in telling me what command to use. And then I would also then, I know which command to Google for at that point. Because
have you just asked it kind of like what git command do I need for this particular application? Is that, I mean, what have you had to ask it to get it to do that?
Things like I would be working on a project and I would I would be going down the wrong path and I want to just simply revert back. Which I know is an easy thing to do, but I don't normally have to revert back through check-ins to commits to find the thing I want. And so I guess I could Google it, but when I was Googling it, like Gemini, Google's thing automatically filled out like the AI thing. And for one, well, I mean, this was a time in which it it helped me. So there are times like that. I know that's not super amazing. I know that's not like super stellar. I would have found the information anyway. It just saved me an extra 20, 30 seconds, but to be honest, I think the key thing is that it saved me from having to context switch from what I was trying to do, which was trying to dig back through a file that I removed that I realized I still needed, to, oh God, I've got to remember how Git works again, to blurt back to that again, right? And
and for coding in particular, the AI stuff has gotten more useful because search has gotten less useful. I mean, there's so many now sites that sort of auto-generate when they see programming-oriented searches, and you have no idea where. So it's like they've cribbed stuff from Stack Overflow, and you end up like, where did this come from? And it doesn't run reliably. Whereas, like, if you just ask, Claude or something like that, it comes up with something and you can test it and it's like, oh, that works, good. And
I thought Claude is very good for code on the software front compared to the others.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that there are, some good uses for AI. And things like translation is AI, and that just vanishes into the background. And, that you can pretty reliably read stuff in other languages, and it that's pretty cool. But a lot of the chaining stuff together and just assuming sort of broad levels of competence across multiple kind of tasks seems a little bit premature to me.
Yeah.
Maybe where AI is really good is where you don't even notice it. And therefore you notice it when it's really screwing up. It's kind of like being the goalkeeper, or it's kind of like being an editor. It's like when you're doing your job fine, no one notices you. But when you're doing the job badly, everybody notices you. And so maybe we're in that sort of situation with AI.
And the trick is, how do you bill for something that you don't notice?
It's still got to be really visible, hasn't it?
Right.
Well, this is it. Now, one area, Brandon, I know you covered this week, where it isn't working particularly well is job seekers. Now, they've been complaining, I think it was 2/3 or something, said that AI was actively unhelpful.
Yeah, right. So this study out from Resume Genius, which is just an online resume platform, but they did a study of people using the site, people hunting for jobs right now, and it was part of a larger study. But basically, it found that they polled 1,000 people, and 69% doubted any AI's ability to boost performance at work, and 62% lacked any faith in the ability to reduce workload. Right, which to me just tells you, again, it seems like there's kind of a going narrative right now that, Microsoft's pushing AI hard, right? And it seems like maybe people at the top of companies, people doing the buying, or people who are, listening to pitches from Microsoft and then going to their purchasing department and saying, "Ooh, this sounds really cool," right? They're doing this without any regard for the people who then have to use it, and so you end up in this situation where, more than around 2/3 of people looking for a job are saying, no, my experience with AI has been that it's not helpful at all. It really kind of sounds to me like we're almost back to, I'm trying to think of the last era that really, I feel like a lot of the, the sort of digital transformation stuff we were dealing with 10 years ago, right? The going line, at least from a lot of different publications, and what I wrote myself back then was basically you've got to include your people in these discussions, right? They need to be involved in deciding what systems they're going to use and how, and they need to be given the chance to give feedback on this. And I'm doubting whether or not anyone learned anything from that last era. Now that we're in a period where 2/3 of people are saying their experience with AI has been a negative one. And I think, Tom, you wrote a piece back in June that I referenced in that story this week, where 70% of people, I can't remember what the story was example, but it was close to 3/4 of people basically saying they didn't want to use AI at work because it didn't help them and made them less productive, right? That's an absurd amount of people, right? And then we can go back to saying this could be due to training or due to the fact that people are being thrown into the AI wolves, but something's not right here, if this many people are having a bad experience.
Something wrong in the state of Denmark.
And this wasn't people. This wasn't people who are upset at AI because they lost their jobs to AI, or it's not people who are upset that they couldn't use AI to get themselves a job. It was just
it was just people saying they didn't trust its ability to help it work. I mean, and it was interesting because in that study, and it was, I can't remember the exact number, but basically, 2/3 said they didn't think it would help them, and only 1/3 or roughly was saying they were worried about it costing them a job, right? So basically, everyone who's having a chance to use this is this isn't as big a threat as you might think right now, because it's like we were just saying, right? It's not nearly as competent or easy to use as the marketing suggests.
I was going to say, with that, the hype cycle is strong in this one, and it's everyone has the hype cycle peaked yet, or has it not? And I don't know. I think Chris is right. We really are at the 8-bit stage at the moment, and
it could be great later on. I like playing with the things too. I think Tobias has been doing a lot of work on local LLMs.
Yep,
our colleague Tobias.
Great report.
And I installed LM Studio on my machine here, and I've been tinkering around with local installations of Llama and stuff. And it's a lot of fun to play with, right? But at the end of the day, it still feels like it's just a toy at this point.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Well, we're going to have to see how it develops. But, well, as always, we'll be keeping an eye on it, and we'll let you know in a future kettle. In the meantime, thank you very much for joining us. And if you want the audio version, you can get it from your regular podcast provider. Have a good day.